Hey, Chris.
What, dude?
Knock, knock.
Who's there? Come in.
No. Cash.
Cashew nuts?
Oh, no, thank you. I prefer peanuts.
Have you seen what cashews look like before they take them?
No, but they're an excellent nut.
They taste really
They're
good.
so
Dude,
good.
cashews are basically grown on like a little apple. Google it.
Really?
Yeah, it's like this big fruit thing that they on. So like for every cashew you eat, and if you ever just like get crazy with it, you could like go through a whole bag.
Can you hold my mic?
But for each cashew, there's a freaking little fruit. And I'll pop it on the screen.
Put it in my hand. Can you do that?
I don't know.
How
if I
big
wanna
is
do
it?
that?
Oh, because it's gonna look. Type in cashew.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. No
That is
way.
amazing.
One
Right?
of those for every
For
nut?
every nut. I was blown away when I saw
Yeah,
that.
that's pretty cool.
I wonder how the fruit tastes.
Probably not very good, or we would have heard about it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Well, it looks like it's toxic.
Toxic.
Yeah, for up to 6% of children. Let's not do that.
All right.
All right, welcome to Travis's training day, which also is the first Friday of our new training cycle. Are we calling it the winter is coming cycle?
The winter cycle.
The winter cycle.
Winter cycle.
But I like the winter is coming cycle.
Yeah.
That's better.
Winter is coming.
Not
It's
to be
kinda cold here in
confused
Georgia.
with the Winter is Coming Classic competition that is at the end of this cycle.
That's correct.
Yes.
Which is also my favorite part of the year.
is it?
It is. I mean, we talked about this in another video, but I think it's really cool because it's an opportunity for everyone to like train hard and push themselves and then have an excuse. I mean, that's really what it is, to like relax for a couple of weeks going into like the holidays, Christmas time.
To go
New
into
Year.
it feeling like you earned it.
Yeah, I earned it. I pushed myself hard, and now you can get ready for the open cycle, which is right after this.
Yeah. It's when did we start doing it? 3 years ago? 4 years
This
ago?
will be our fourth annual.
4 years ago.
Yeah.
And 4 years ago. This is
start.
too early in the morning for filming.
We're filming at 11:15, by the way. Just kidding.
All right, whatever. Let's get into this damn
All right,
training
Let's
session.
go ahead and jump into it. Travis started with 4 sets of seated box jumps and standing landmine full contact twist. And this kind of started with the last training cycle. One of the things we noticed is people weren't warming up very well, or they weren't getting like that pop that we want. So we wanted to find ways to like basically warm up their nervous system so they're ready to go into whatever the next piece is. Like last cycle, we did snatches and cleans after. This cycle, athletes are going to have the choice between front squats and overhead
What is that
squats.
pop, Max?
What is it? What do you mean?
What's that pop? What's the pop we're looking for?
Well, I think it's neural speed in general. A lot of people in CrossFit will try to get all their Olympic lifts up by like ramping just their squat up and neglect speed training in general and just having your ability to fire as fast as possible. It's kind of like a brain signaling issue that people need to develop. So we put plyos in regularly, and I think Fridays in the strength program in general is more speed-based Olympic lifting training.
Yeah. So we'll do a lot of speed-based work, but the start of each of these sessions will be plyo-based work to get that, again, your nervous system ramped up, and also work on hip extension. Like a seated box jump is going to allow you to be able to learn how to drive your feet into the floor, get to extension, and create some velocity.
Yeah, I think these types of accessory movements, sometimes I've seen athletes, they go into them and they think, well, this isn't important because I need to get to the main body of my training. I need to get to the sexy stuff. But I think what I've seen over the years, just in general, is that the best athletes in the world in all sports, but in CrossFit also, really do pay attention to how they execute all the details of their training. They want to make sure they're doing their accessory work right. If it's written as a warm-up to prime their nervous system for speed, they're doing it fast. They're not just getting on there and kind of like jumping onto the box. It's literally as intentional as the main work. And I think this training day will be a good thing to illustrate that it's not going to be the same, like, oh, it's just a Metcon, a triplet or a couplet of a basic thing. It's incorporating strength and conditioning components that really do make you a better athlete long term. It's like the foundation of athleticism.
You know that I like my analogies and metaphors.
Oh, God.
So I'm going to use one here.
It is too early for you to be able to make a good one.
I genuinely mean this, and this is to Max's point. I think most people, when they're building the Lego set, like they get excited about that big piece, right? listen. They get excited about that big piece, and so they start putting it up. They build their tower, but it falls over because they don't have a foundation. Every single element in the training, there's a purpose for it to build the correct foundation so that you can continue to put those Legos on top. By the end of the cycle, you have this nice tower as opposed to this little skinny thing that's going to fall over.
Does that make sense? Yeah, it actually does make sense, but I couldn't stop thinking about the taco analogy that one time.
Oh man,
I need to make a highlight reel.
We need to get all of Brandon's metaphors.
What about the full contact twist? Can I get back to the training? Get away from these Legos?
I just asked Matt or Mike to put in some golf related stuff.
No, I think rotational work generally in CrossFit, if we're doing it, is more for maintenance of athleticism.
Yes.
It's not usually tested at the open quarterfinal or even semifinal level, other than maybe running or like pulling a sled, but just maintaining your spinal rotation and your scapular movement to be able to go to both sides is something that we just put in more as like accessory work into training, as opposed to the jumps are for speed and it has a direct transfer into performance characteristics in CrossFit. The rotational work is more just so you move like an athlete for longer.
And this also will help you with some of the moves that you're doing in this session, but also other things in the sport. So think about a one-arm dumbbell squat snatch. The ability to be able to thoracically rotate helps so much, especially if you have bad shoulder positions or like me, bad ankle positions. You have to find ways to kind of manipulate that position. The same thing's true for your overhead squat, even though that you are using both arms. Being able to have some ability to manipulate your positions helps in the sport, keeps you safer, and it actually gets you stronger because you're able to do some things dynamically that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do.
My friend Doug used to say that there's a statistic out there that when you lose that rotation as an old person, that's when you stop being able to wipe your own ass. And that's when you just call it a day.
Is that when you
so
go
he said
between
he
your
never
legs?
wanted to lose that.
Is that for
you
real?
live a longer life.
Like, is that an actual statistic or you
Well,
just...
hold on. He said that for years, and then eventually he was like, "Nah, I don't know if that's true." But it sounds good. Like, if you can't wipe your own ass, like, what are we doing?
You can go through the middle though.
You could. All right, so that leads us then into kind of the main lifts for the day. And before we kind of dive into what Travis did, I think it's important to note that one of the limitations just in general of group programming is the inability to individualize for an athlete. And we've tried to solve that by coming up with some like smaller solutions with our skill programs, our extra credit work, but also having options for our strength work. And this cycle is no different. On Fridays, what Travis is doing here, he had the choice between front squats and overhead squats. And then the next piece, he had a choice between power snatches and power clean and jerks. And we will give you directions once you're in the program on how to decide which one to do. Basically, you're finding the one that has the biggest limitation.
I'm kind of offended that you called them small solutions. There's 15 skill programs. There's changes.
Big
there's a lot of solutions in an attempt to try to get people better. Anyways, jumping into what Travis did, we picked overhead squat for him. Travis preparing for Rogue. So a lot of what the selection was for me wasn't necessarily that he's going to get all the progressions following this. I might have to accelerate them to actually get him ready for comp. So he might just be doing it for touches. And for his training, overhead squat just made more sense for what we were trying to train going into Rogue. He's got a big front squat. And this is a good example. You choose them based on what you need to train in it. So if you're somebody who's limited by front squat, that's a better choice for you. Travis has over a 400-pound front squat and he struggles more with the overhead squat. So that would be the movement selection that he would actually choose.
And then for every Friday, it'll just be linear progressions with the movement that you choose. Now, some people may alternate these. Some people are like, I'm good at both. And they'll go like, we have elite athletes. I'll go front squat, overhead squat, front squat, overhead squat throughout the cycle. But we'd say for most people, individualize it as best you can. And like if Travis is doing this, he's working on his overhead squat because again, to Max's point, his front squat is like ridiculous, but he can work on his overhead squat, which then leads into a better snatch as well.
And all of those instructions would be in the program a little bit more clear. They're all just written out in coach's notes and videos.
Yep.
So I think 275 was his top lift. And then he moved into power clean and jerk. And the two options were power snatch, power clean and jerk. And I just figured he's going overhead with the overhead squat. For the more power driven one, I'm going to choose the power clean and jerk. So I get like a snatch transition thing and a clean and jerk movement. He hit 315 on this day, which is a pretty solid lift. It was like both of these were kind of at to 9 out of 10 effort. And for the first day of the training cycle, they're more so to establish baselines for progression. So this isn't like you're coming in and you're doing full 5RM testing or full 1 rep max testing. It's coming in to establish a progressive baseline for you so that through the cycle, by the time you get to the end of it, you're getting stronger than where we assessed on week 1.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Most people get so excited on week 1. They go as heavy as possible, maybe tweak themselves like I've done in the past, or it's almost unattainable every single week. So it's almost better to be a little conservative and then build on that over the course of the cycle.
Yeah, going on the themes of better strength and conditioning protocols, one of the things I think that it's like one of CrossFitters' biggest gifts, but also something that holds them back is the lack of restraint against max effort. And I think in Metcons, you're often pushing that threshold as hard as you possibly can. But when you're building base speed or base strength or base endurance, you actually do have to do a lot more sub-maximal work. So a lot of times it's good to almost think that you have like a training max or like a 90% effort max versus a like game day competition max. If you can put that in your head sometimes, I think it can keep you more consistent and less likely to be injured or burned down. Yeah, like consistency really is
especially in this sport.
Yeah. And there are actually famous strength programs that actually build their progressions off of 90% of your 1 rep max. So they say, oh, what's your 1 rep max? Okay, multiply that by 0.9, then do your percentages. So that could just be a good model for you, like 9 out of 10 RPE for most of the time when it says build to a tough single or build to a max can really, really help you over the long term.
And just a quick note for those that are new to the program or maybe haven't done a ton of strength work for a while. Let's say we have a bunch of people that come in. It's like, it's been 6 months since I've lifted heavy. That 0.9 conversion is great. So basically whatever your 1RM was, let's say it's 100 pounds, go 0.9. So now I'm starting at 90 and then I use the percentages off of that is great.
This is not about me. This session is
clarify that real quick because I think most people might get that wrong. As you said, use 90% of your 1RM, and then percentages off the 90%.
Yeah. So 90% would actually be 0.9 times 0.9. It'd actually be 81% of your 1RM would be the number for 90%, which is way more conservative than most people are used to. But I wanted to jump off your point and say, I went through a long period of deconditioning after a recent ankle sprain and got back into strength training, and my numbers had deteriorated way more than that. Mm-hmm. And also they made me way more sore. So this is the first Friday of the first week of a new training cycle. If you are jumping into it and you know that you're deconditioned, you should really think about scaling your overall intensity and overall volume more than you think to build consistency through the cycle. Because by week 3, 4, 5, 6, I really felt like a different human being. But in the beginning, getting back from deconditioning can be very hard. So just be mindful of that you might need to tweak the duration of these EMOMs or the effort down to 7 or 8, because the goal in the first week of a cycle is to build momentum, not to crush yourself so hard that you're not sure you can sustain the next 8 weeks of training, which is where all the gains are going to actually come from.
Yeah, I think the important thing to note there is that you have options, just like we talked about with if you're choosing front squats or overhead squats. The same thing. We have 5 different training paths, and then within those paths, we have the options. So you could do, let's say if you're a master's athletes will do option 1. If they feel good, they can do full volume, full intensity, maybe a younger athlete that's more resilient. And then we have an option 2, which is a little lower volume.
Shots fired.
I do the master's option 2 all the time. I tell people in the program, I'm not even a master's
athlete. And for those who don't know what option 2 is.
Basically, it's our lower volume, lower intensity option. You could do it in 60 to 75 minutes a day. It's basically that kind of, I'm a little busy. I got work to do. I need to go pick up the kids, but you still want a good training session with a good template that follows the main template.
It's not like being a weenie about your training. It's playing the long game, knowing that, hey, not every day is going to be a home run and I need to adjust accordingly.
Yeah. Speaking of metaphors, I went to a CrossFit football seminar like way back in the day, and John Wellborn had this metaphor that you're always trying to move dirt. And some training days you have a shovel to move dirt, and some days you have a teaspoon to move dirt, but you're always moving dirt.
My teaspoon moves fast though.
But I like that idea, that concept of just knowing that, hey, when you come in, if you're smashed, doing an option 2 day or doing a whole week of option 2 day is not worse training. Sometimes it's actually better to be less intense, less volume, because at that time of the year or in that cycle of your life, it's just like can't be your top priority to push. So, I mean, that's again, you said we had small solutions. I feel like all we have is solutions to help people try to figure out how do you make this training work as optimally for you relative to where you are and what your past training and your general skill set is like.
Yeah. And I'll make this a pitch right now because I think this is the most important thing or the coolest thing that we do is we have coaches in there that are actually helping and answering questions. So like if you're confused on which path you should do or
I was about to say, if you're confused on any of this, get into the water cooler, which is our chat, and bug the shit out of Brandon.
Yes. And I will answer your questions in like 5 minutes. So
he's like, we have coaches in there. Basically Brandon's in there. Like
as a matter of fact, do me a favor. If you don't have any questions, make some up and just keep this man up for all hours of the day.
You're going to kill me, Chris.
All right, moving on. Next was 3. Can you read that? That's text is tiny. And you got the blue background.
Oh man, I got this on like the 8 font, so it's tiny. 3 sets of prone GHD YTWs. So you're going from a Y to a T to a W. You can watch Travis do that. And then you'll rest 30 seconds and go into seated straddle wall slides. This again is some accessory prep before we get into the EMOMs that are right after this.
Yeah, so the EMOMs coming after it are more advanced gymnastic skills. Generally speaking, most people in today's society, you got the rolled forward shoulders and more kyphotic upper back postures because we're on phones, looking down, driving, hands in front of us all the time. And CrossFit's demands are very complicated on the shoulder joint. You have to go overhead in a snatch, overhead in a handstand walk, overhead doing advanced gymnastic skills. They have to be able to rotate well doing muscle ups. So sometimes this preparatory work that some people either see and skip over and don't do, or don't do with a high degree of focus. This type of stuff can not only set you up well afterwards, like in today's training session where you're going to be in better positions if you prep those things well, but also over the long term, it just will keep your shoulders in better posture and position to allow you to train for more years, which really is how people get better at anything.
Yeah, and I really don't think people realize when you sit at a desk all day and then you go into the gym, you just try to open up your shoulders right away. Like there is an inherent risk there. Or you're not opening up at all. You still feel really healthy, but then 2 years later, you really are rolled forward, and now your snatch position, your gymnastics positions are really bad, and you're wondering why. It's that slow like drip that happens over time because we are on our phones. That the shoulder position is so important in the sport of CrossFit. I think it's the most important thing because there's so many things that are tested with the overhead position. So make sure you do those things well. And even if you're not following our program, if you could follow one tip that I say, open up your shoulders so you have good positions.
Yeah, and those movements are pretty good. Just the YTWs,
YTW.
Isn't there an I?
The L
I option somewhere?
You can have, yeah.
You can do it.
There's all kinds of options.
Hold on, finish that.
Yeah, my thought?
No. He was about to say the old
YTW.
I don't know what I was going to say anyways. Moving on.
You're stepping on my cord, by the way, and choking me out.
Oh, sorry. All right, read the next thing off, Brandon.
It's in your chair. You're choking me more. All right, then we go into our gymnastics EMOMs. And for our elite training path, this is all combined into kind of one training session. So we would ask them to basically separate the strength work from the CrossFit. Everyone else will, in the different training paths, you'll see how it's ordered differently. Travis is obviously following the elite style training path today. So it's 2 separate gymnastics EMOMs, and then it finishes with a cyclical based EMOM. It's pretty high power, high turnover. The first one's going to be a 10-minute EMOM where...
Let me give it a little teaser here. Is before we started filming these parts, Travis was like, okay, whatever. And then by the end of it, he was like, these were insane. So they look chill on paper, but they'll get you.
Totally. So the first 10-minute EMOM is all gymnastics based. The odd minutes, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, are going to be 3 strict pull-ups plus 5 chest to bar pull-ups. You can do those butterfly plus 5 or 7 chin over bar pull-ups. Then the even minutes, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 will be 5 strict handstand push-ups with the 30-inch wall standard, and then 10 kipping handstand push-ups. For our elite level athletes, we're trying to be aggressive with this. I put in the intent note, which you have that every day. It's an intent, target, and feel, that they're trying to be as aggressive as possible, doing those fast and unbroken, and then obviously resting as much as you can before the next minute. And then you go into another 10-minute EMOM, which again is gymnastics based. The odd minute will be 1 seated legless rope climb plus 1 regular rope climb into the even minutes of 3 wall walks and 6 wall facing strict handstand push-ups.
Yeah, so Trav's feedback on this, he was unbroken on all of the things and all of the components. And he was like, the first one wasn't really that bad and he could do it unbroken. But when he went into the second one, the compounding effect of all of the work in the first one made the seated legless and the legless really, really hard. And Travis, like in the road qualifier, in the video we just put out, he came back in to redo the legless rope climb workout and won it in the qualifier. So he's one of the best in the world at legless rope climbs. And he said that he was like almost at failure by the end of those. So I would expect most people to maybe get smashed by that if they tried to keep up. If you did, you could do one legless, one normal rope climb, then the next minute, maybe just one regular rope climb, or extend the EMOMs out a little bit. You can go like on the 75 seconds or on the 90 seconds. But just to preempt you, this one is very, very, very sneaky. It might not look as bad as it is when you actually put it into action.
And if you're following another training path, it's not going to be seated legless. You'll have different variations of the rope climb. So it's going to depend on what you want to follow.
Yeah. The intermediates won't be doing this.
Right. But I will say that if you're good at legless, and push yourself a little bit in the first couple of minutes, and then maybe you do modify it down. And again, all those notes are in the training for you.
Yep. So that's
anything else about that first EMOM? I feel like I did a lot of fucking filming on that. And I would like to use that footage.
So no, so Travis doing this, I think he's going to make it look too easy for most people. Going from a strict pull-up right into a butterfly pull-up, right into a chin over bar actually takes some practice and some control, but I think it's worth practicing. We haven't seen too many complexes in the sport. But now that Bosman's programming a little bit more, and over the last couple of years, you have seen some complexity added. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing this, and then just creating some dense pulling environments. But I do think it's worth practicing. Can you go straight from a strict pull-up into a butterfly chest to bar without having to pause, into a chin over bar where you're not doing a chin over bar where it's still hitting your chest, right? Like, how can you create some deviation between the chest to bar and the chin over bar? Even elite athletes are like, I had 30 chin over bar pull-ups, but I was basically doing chest to bars because I'm not used to that smaller kip. So practicing that technique, I think, is really important. The last thing I'll say is, what about the hand positions with your chest bar or chin over bar pull-ups? Like, are you playing around with that to speed them up? And what we worked on this last training cycle was movement speed with all our gymnastics movements and some of the body weight stuff. And some easy ways to manipulate that, especially as you get more resilient, is widening your hands out, narrowing your hands, putting your feet together and having a tighter kip. Practicing different variations to see which way is fastest and most efficient will allow you to be better at the sport.
I had something to add, but do you have enough footage to keep going?
Did I just keep going?
I'm just kidding.
I'm comfortable with what we've done now.
Okay, good.
You want to do the other minute? The handstand push-ups?
Yeah. What about those?
Yeah, I think the big thing here is that we're using the CrossFit standard, and sometimes we'll change it. Sometimes we'll go back to like the wall standard where you have to raise your hands and all that. But we want to make sure we're practicing the standard, because that really messed people up last year, is getting their thumbs on the tape line 10 inches away from the wall, 30 inches wide. So one, make sure you're actually setting that up. I've seen some people that are like, oh, I'm guesstimating, but it's like, that's nowhere near what it actually will feel like. And then the same thing's true here. Can you do 5 really fast strict handstand push-ups, and immediately as you go down right into your kipping handstand push-ups, getting the feel of being able to create some change or have some variability with your handstand push-up? And then with your kipping handstand push-ups, for those that are higher level athletes, start working on speed of the descent, getting down, and as soon as your head touches, can you get back up? For those that aren't as good, maybe you're just working on your kipping technique in general. Like, how do I get my hips into the wall? And we have a great tip video that Mia did on that on our YouTube page.
All right, finally, Mom.
Yeah, so for the RX level athletes, it's going to be 15 or 12 cal row on your odd minutes, and then 15, 12 cal bike on your even minutes. Our elite level athletes will do 18 and 14 cals, and that's male, female, respectively. If you're doing 18 and 14, that's really, really aggressive. You have to be a Travis Mayer style athlete, like a really powerful but enduring athlete to do that. Most people probably be more confident at the 15 and 12.
Yeah, this is amazing. Talking to Travis about this, when I first had it written out, I was thinking, 18 and 18 is going to be like pretty tough and pretty breathy, and the gymnastics things aren't going to be hard. Then I talked to him, and he did 18 cals in both minutes in under 40 seconds on every machine. So
most people won't do that.
Still very challenging, he said, but that means he had 20 seconds of rest in every interval and was around 1,700 cals per hour on both machines.
That's actually impressive.
That's very impressive. It just highlights how good Trav is at cyclical machines. But don't let that fool you. I have been in this environment for a while, and I'm seeing high-level athletes do things, and you're like, oh, I could do that. Like, that's not that hard. And then you try and get smashed. I think 15 and 12 is, unless you're like almost a semifinal level athlete, is going to be a pretty good challenge to be able to sustain power and not have a fall off, or be like coming up to the end of the minute and having to jump right off the machine. So, take that for what it's worth in terms of Travis's capacity here.
Yeah. And the intent here too is still to have some high turnover, high power. So even if you need to modify down, if you want to do 15 or you have to even modify below that, still try to get a hard, like your max sustainable output. What can I do on minute 1 that I can still do on minute 10, but it's like a really aggressive pace, as opposed to the athlete that's like, I'm just going to go easy for 55 seconds and then go to the other bike. This isn't a zone 2 session. This is supposed to be a high powered session.
What was the rest between all these? Is it rest as needed?
Yeah, it's rest as needed. So if you ever see a plus sign in our training program, or you'll see a note in between like a A and a B, it'll say rest is needed in there. So you can rest between these EMOMs.
What's your recommendation for, is it literally just rest as long as you need? Or
yeah,
what's a good
I usually
rule of
say
thumb?
like 5 to 7 minutes between these EMOMs is like a really good place to be, unless like you have to set up a bunch of stuff and it takes you 10 minutes. If you're like completely destroyed, then you need to either reach out to a coach and say, how should I modify the first EMOM to make sure that I'm not so redline that I can't recover between these pieces? Or you just need to make sure that you're like actually resting like a full 10 or 12 minutes between the two.
Yeah, I think if you get beyond a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio and you're not recovered in a session like this, it means that you went too hard relative to your capacity. Most people should be able to do like, it's 10 minutes of work, somewhere around 5 minutes of rest should give you enough recovery that you could maintain quality in the next. 10 should definitely be enough. And if you've extended beyond that and you're just kind of lollygagging through the session, you'd be better off either cutting the volume or making them a little shorter and making sure that it's recoverable volume that you're building. Because remember, this is also week 1 of a training cycle, right? Like these are places where we build progressions from, and you don't want your first week to be like, wow, that was so overwhelming that I could barely even keep up with it. Sometimes it's like that in your first training session if you've taken time off, but if you're coming into a training cycle, that's kind of your focus should be making sure it's a 8, 9 out of 10 to be able to complete the session and not that you're just wrecked from it.
Yeah, and we will progress these. So in week 3 and then week 5, you're going to see some EMOMs that are similar to this, that the volume actually is a little bit more dense. Some of the minutes are just a little bit more volume. Some are a little bit more dense as far as like you got to finish in a certain time demand. So just keep that in mind that we are trying to progress this. So if it's like completely wrecking you, you'd pull back a little bit.
That's a whole session, right?
That's a whole session. And then Travis came back and he did a PM.
Oh, he did?
Right? He did the pistol work.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
So we can touch on that just real quick. This is one of our extra credit options. So Travis is doing this as a PM. If you're in the program, it's a PM session for you. So basically it's, hey, if you have time after your normal session, you can rest a couple hours, come back in and do these extra credit sessions. Awesome. If you're having to cram it all into one.
Does it work like at school? It's like, oh man, I got an F on that front squat during the first part, but if I do this extra credit, it'll even out.
Yeah. Well, it actually kind of is like that.
Yeah.
I mean, like Travis specifically, if he does a lot of training volume of front loaded squatting or a lot of jumping, his knees can get really tender. And he's a taller athlete with bigger, thicker legs, and getting into the squat positions relative to somebody like Noah, who's shorter, like you can just see in the bottom of the pistol, he's not as stable. Doing this extra credit work, and he's been doing movement training literally since I've coached him on his squat positions and making sure his knees don't cave as much. It really does transfer directly to less pain and higher performance. Yeah. So I know he was like kind of joking about it, but the extra credit, I feel like if you're not good at something, you probably have to be doing more work than your peers to be able to catch up to where they are, because you're just, for whatever reason, not as talented in it. Whereas Travis in cyclical machines is very good. So he does less work on that relative to like movement training and extra credit. And
it also is like, maybe you pick and choose your extra credit. So to your school point, my math score is really good, but my social studies or whatever, which was actually the opposite in school. Yeah. Okay. But maybe you are really good at pistols. So you would just say, I don't need to do this one, but I'm going to do the hand balancing one that we have on Wednesdays because I need to work on my hand balancing and pirouettes and all those kind of things. It's another option that we give the athlete to individualize their training. And we don't say that each person should do all of these. It should be the ones that you really need to target. And then again, you want to rest as needed, come back in, and then put some real focus and intent into the pistol session, into the hand balancing, into the power sessions that we have.
Do I need to be stressing out about doing the extra credit?
No, totally not. Now, if you're a high level athlete that like feels like the one thing that kept me out of semifinals, the one thing that kept me out of quarterfinals even was my handstand walking, then you should be doing some of the extra credit hand balancing work so that you can improve your hand balancing so that you can clean handstand walk. And the same thing's true. Like if you know that pistols come out in the open and you're screwed, then you should be doing this pistol work to make sure you're improving that. But just to get it in because you feel like you need to do everything that's written, I think that can be a little dangerous for the athlete.
Yeah, I think the best thing to do if you're actually considering getting better and you hear all these options, it can almost be overwhelming. You're like, oh my God, there's multiple paths. There's elite path, there's extra credit, there's skill programs. It's not that complicated when you actually get into the program and you can ask Brandon questions and you can understand like, oh, okay, this is where I am as an athlete. So a lot of the choices are already kind of pre-made for you. If you're an intermediate athlete, the level of volume is written close to where that should be for you. The extra credits should be relatively straightforward, like, oh, I'm good at this or I'm not good at that. And then you can just ask questions to Mia or Brandon or Mike or anybody that's in the water cooler that can give you some guidance as to exactly which ones you should choose and when. Because it can just, even just in talking about it now, there's like a lot of things people got to think about. And I feel like we can take it for granted because we've been doing it for 10 years. So it's more normalized to us as coaches. But if it sounds overwhelming, get in. This should give you an idea of what the training would look and feel like. But then when you actually do it, you'll get something that's a little bit more geared towards like where you are right now. If you ask questions when you're onboarding.
Yeah. And again, utilize the water cooler, utilize the notes that we have in there and the daily training videos. We try to set it up to where you don't have a ton of questions, but we know that there always will be some because there are options in there. But if you read the notes, you watch the daily training video, that will answer most of the things that you may have questions about. And then obviously if you have any others, that's where the water cooler comes in.
Yeah. So this training day, is highlighted. It's a lot of things that most general CrossFitters, if you're just following a normal CrossFit program, normal affiliate program, and you see like an Olympic lifting piece plus a Metcon, and that's your general structure of what training is. There's a lot of different styles of things in here. There's more accessory work mixed in. There's more speed and plyometric work. There's EMOMs as opposed to a straight Metcon. That's not what this whole training cycle is going to be like, but this is a good workout that we thought could illustrate one of the reasons why people coming back to us on a regular basis are staying healthy for long periods of time. And Travis being in it for 10 years and being an 8-time games athlete is partially because he's willing to do some of the things that feel more boring or less sexy. Like you want to be doing that super hard charging stuff, but sometimes to do that, you need to build that foundation. Like Brandon said with his Lego foundation, you need to put the work into being structurally supporting yourself to go hard. So that would be like maybe some of the more boring stuff throughout the cycle. Can you highlight, since we have the program up, like some of the more key CrossFit things that would be coming into the cycle? They can watch the full cycle overview video on the website, but at least just for this video, we can give them a couple little
taste.
Teases. Just a little teases.
Just a taste. What movie is that from? Is that Dewey Cox?
I've never
just a taste.
Can you chop it in here?
Or is that Ray Charles? I don't know. Go ahead.
No, sorry. So the way that we set up our training is they're not going to be hard Metcons every single day. There's some intensity in every single day because we want to give, again, people options for that or options to pull back if they want to do an option too. But for example, on this Friday, it's EMOM based, skill based, movement efficiency based. But the very next day, we have what's called our Throwdown, which every Saturday we have a community leaderboard where our individual athletes, our compete level athletes from all over the world that want to sign up and go on the leaderboard. It's all free to anybody that wants to sign up. They do a hard Metcon, and that's a 3-minute on, 1 minute off, basically like an interval style like you saw at the games, where they're going to do bar muscle ups, double dumbbell clean and jerks, toes to bar, and double dumbbell box step ups. Like that's a hard, grindy Metcon. And that's intentional, right? Like we do our EMOMs on Friday. We want you to come in fresh and then be able to really grind on a Saturday with a fun, hard throwdown workout. And then the same thing's true. Like earlier in the week, we have some intervals, and then we have a middle of the week, 5 round for time, rest 5 minutes, 4 round for time, rest 5 minutes, 3 round for time. That's a hard squat endurance based Metcon. So you want intensity, we want to have some focus, but you don't want to just grind yourself to pulp by the end of the week every single week, because then it's really hard to recover.
Amen.
Chris. Hey, Chris.
Hey. Knock. Who's there?
Cal.
Cal who?
No, Cal's moo.
Oh no, let's end the video on that. Perfect ending.